Welcome to Time Monk Radio Network. I'm Gemini, and we are welcoming back Susun Weed as part of our Health and Wellness series. We are continuing our discussion of prostate health and the significance of PSA, BPH, and LUTS. Welcome back, Susun.
Thank you for inviting me back. I'm so glad to have this opportunity to talk with you all and to continue our exploration of what's going on in your prostate. And as we established last week, probably men younger than 50 are not going to be listening to this because the prostate is just kind of there. But once you're over 50, that you're going to, if nothing else, be told by your doctor, you need to have a PSA test. And I quote, "A PSA test starts the wheels turning on a treadmill that can drag you into further diagnostic testing, resulting finally in invasive surgery, incontinence, and impotence. It all starts with a simple, seemingly innocuous PSA test. Like mammograms, the PSA test has been entrenched as the best way to find early cancer, but it isn't. Like mammograms, PSA tests increase needless surgery that can cause functional problems that can persist for the rest of your life, and they do not decrease mortality." Recent studies of PSA screening and mortality involving 250,000 European and American men found no reduction in deaths from prostate cancer after 10 years of screening. And as a matter of fact, at 7 years, the death rate was 13% lower for the group that did not get PSA tests. Prostate-specific antigen, PSA, is an enzyme, which means it's a protein, and it's produced by the, you're right, prostate-specific antigen. It actually has a function. It liquefies the ejaculate so that sperm can swim around. All right. And generally, PSA stays where it's supposed to be in the prostatic fluids, but it can spill into the blood. And so the PSA test is a blood test. And usually it spills into the blood when there's irritation, inflammation, infection, injury, disease, or you knew it was coming, cancer in the prostate. But look at how many other options there are besides cancer. Again, a quote from, I believe this is from Dr. Thomas Stammy, Doctor of Urology. He says the PSA test is worthless as a screening tool, and you're 47 times more likely to be harmed than to have your life saved if you get a PSA test. It's a smoke alarm. If your PSA level is high or rising, you'll be encouraged to have a biopsy, and about 90% of the time the biopsy finds no cancer but leaves behind, I quote again, debilitating problems. The benefits of prostate cancer screening are modest at best with an enormous downside, in fact, a greater downside than any other cancer we screen for. The economic and psychological costs of false positives on all screening tests are not calculated, but they are huge. So, should you go and have a PSA test? Well, you know, there's a Preventative Services Health Task Force in the United States. And the Preventative Services Health Task Force says that men should not have a PSA test. The Preventative Services Task Force also suggested that women not have mammograms. And I continue to draw this parallel. These are tests that are pushed by modern scientific medicine as ways to protect your health, as ways to prolong your life, as ways that will find cancer early so we can treat it and cure it. So far as I can tell from the studies I've looked at and from the books I've read by people who've looked at far more studies than I have, all these statements are lies. It's simply not true for either test. Again, I go into detail about what is actually going on and why these tests are not what they seem to be in Down There, Sexual and Reproductive Health, The Wise Woman Way, and in Breast Cancer, breast health, The Wise Woman Way. But let's jump past this for a moment and just suppose that you decide to get a PSA test anyhow. Because doctors can be very persuasive, can't they? And maybe your insurance insists that you have a PSA test, or goodness only knows why, but there are plenty of reasons why you might find that you've had a PSA test and, your PSA is high. What are you going to do? Do not get a biopsy. I hope that your doctor is as wise as the one I mentioned last week, who said to my friend, your PSA level is high. I'm not concerned about it ordinarily. What I would do is I would have you do another PSA test in 3 to 6 months. That's very helpful, kind, health-conserving doctor. So, first of all, suggest that you wait and get a second test before any kind of biopsy or before you take any kind of drugs. Here are 3 things that have been shown to reliably lower the PSA, and you can easily do them. And the first one is eat pizza. Well, not exactly. It's eat tomato sauce. Eat tomato sauce every day. And if the only way you can stand tomato sauce is pizza, then go for it, because it's going to be a problem with all that white bread. But, hey, maybe you could get them to put double sauce on it. Tomato sauce eaten daily has a most amazing and powerful effect on the prostate and on what's going on with prostate-specific antigen.
So it's not enough to eat the tomatoes. The tomatoes need to be heated. Is that correct?
The longer they're cooked, the more effective they are as medicine.
Okay.
Remember that there is no nutrition available from raw food.
Okay.
So whenever we are looking for food to be our medicine, we want to use one of the 5 primary ways to break the cell wall of that fruit or vegetable so that we can get to the nutrition. We can cook it like we're doing with the tomatoes. And the longer we cook it and the higher the heat we use, the more valuable minerals and vitamins we will get from cooking fruits and vegetables. We can also freeze them. So if, say, you make like a pasta sauce with fresh tomatoes and you say, oh, I really don't want to cook it a lot, if you freeze it, you will get much of the same benefit. And then, of course, unfreeze it and eat it. And the same thing with frozen fruit. And frozen fruit, of course, is picked at the absolute peak of its freshness and frozen right then, whereas much other fruit has to be picked when it's green in order to be shipped to market. So you're actually getting a lot more antioxidant vitamins in frozen fruit than you would in fresh fruit. And you can also dehydrate fruits and vegetables, and that will break the cell wall. And I always have to laugh, the plum growers petitioned for their dehydrated product to no longer be called by that put-down word, prune. And that we should henceforth refer to them, and if you go into a store, you will see they are now called dried plums.
I have seen that.
And dried fruit is an excellent way to get good antioxidant value from your fruit. And dried tomatoes, too. As a matter of fact, down there, I have a recipe for dried tomato pesto. My brother grows over 50 different kinds of heirloom tomatoes. He primarily sells the plants as starts. But, of course, he grows many of them out and sent me a whole bag of dehydrated tomatoes. I mean, we're talking like 5 or 10 pounds, a huge amount. And I called him up. I said, what am I supposed to do with these? He says, pour boiling water over them, throw them in your blender with olive oil and garlic, and spread it on bread.
That sounds divine.
It is so divine. And of course, we have gotten the fourth way to break down the cell wall in there, which is oil. Oil breaks down cell walls, as evidenced by clothing that we have with oil stains, which we can't ever get out. And people say to me, well, doesn't vinegar break down the cell walls? And I say, how many pieces of clothing do you have with vinegar stains? No, it doesn't. It's oil that really does it. So first dehydrating the tomato, and then pouring boiling water over it, and then blending it up with oil, you get a lot of minerals and vitamins from your tomatoes that way, because we've really broken into where the nourishment is. And then the fifth way to break down the cell wall is fermentation. And I don't think anybody ferments tomatoes. Or at least I haven't had any fermented tomato product. But you could probably make, I don't know, lacto-fermented tomatoes. I've eaten a lot of other lacto-fermented things, but nobody has ever served me lacto-fermented tomatoes. I'm not sure why. So, tomato sauce. Another excellent way to lower your PSA is to reduce your dietary fat to 20%. So, dietary fat at 20% is so little fat that what I suggest to men is you do your best to completely avoid all fat. Pretend that you are eating a 0% fat diet, and you will probably get close to 20%. There's a lot of hidden fats in a lot of different foods. And so if you go out of your way to avoid fats that you can see, you will bring that down. And this has been shown to be, again, very successful at lowering PSA. Or you could eat 1 ounce, that's 30 grams of cooked ground flax seeds daily. That's a lot of flax seeds. And it has to be ground, and it has to be cooked. It doesn't seem to work if they're not cooked. And you could cook them in pancakes, you can cook them in muffins, you can cook them in bread, you can cook them in cupcakes, you could cook it in cookies, however you want to do it, but it does need to be a full ounce of flaxseed a day. If those sound too difficult, you might want to consider using antibiotic herbs. We're not exactly sure why it is that using antibiotics of any kind seems to reduce PSA levels, but we think it's because there can be low-level infections that are not really infections, they're not really going anywhere, but do cause a slight amount of white blood cell activity and thus swelling in the prostate. And that using herbs like echinacea or yarrow can reduce that line of background or low-level infection and bring down that PSA count. So, to sum up on PSA, so far as I can tell, getting a PSA test is not a wise, safe, or healthy thing to do. And should you get one, anyhow, and find that it's elevated, eat more tomato sauce, eat an ounce of cooked flax seeds a day, reduce your dietary fat, and or consider using antibiotics, especially herbal antibiotics like echinacea or yarrow in rather lavish doses. You'll see your PSA drop. B, P, H is benign prostate hyperplasia. What it means is your prostate is growing and it's okay. Don't worry about it. It is one of the most common prostate problems for American men and is virtually unknown outside North America and Europe. In the United States, in 2010, treatment of BPH netted over $2 billion annually and resulted in 300,000, that's more than 250,000 surgeries. And yes, black men do have benign prostate hyperplasia. In fact, they are more likely to have it. It does run in families. And what can we say? The men who eat the most fruits and vegetables have the lowest risk of BPH. Those with the highest blood content of vitamin C, beta-carotene, and lutein are 16% less likely to have an enlarged prostate if they get it from food, not pills. And particularly effective foods include orange juice, peas, peaches, and winter squash. In fact, men who eat the most green and yellow produce are the ones who are the least bothered by BPH. Even as little as half a cup of green food daily will lower risk by almost 20%. Half a cup of spinach, half a cup of kale, half a cup of broccoli, half a cup of Brussels sprouts, half a cup of peas, or a cup of nourishing herbal infusion, especially nettle or comfrey leaf, will lower risk. Or half a cup of yellow foods on a daily basis: carrots, peaches, sweet potatoes, winter squash, papaya, cantaloupe, and apricots. Not quite as much reduction, but a good 13 to 15% reduction. If you are dealing with BPH, there are lots of herbs and things that are ready to run to your rescue. Let me kind of skim the cream off the top here for you, and then let's look at a few other very exciting ones as well. Take saw palmetto tincture. We talked about saw palmetto last week. And again, what's important if you're going to be using saw palmetto is to use it in a tincture form, not a capsule form. You know, just across the board, Susun Weed is against capsules. She doesn't think herbs are very effective as capsules. She thinks we pay too much when we take them as capsules, and she thinks they're really overpriced as capsules. So stick with your tinctures, your nourishing herbal infusions, or other safe, easy ways to use your herbs. If saw palmetto is not your prostate's cup of tea or tincture, try rye pollen, and we'll talk more of the specifics about how you get rye pollen and what you do with it. You could also, and to me this is the simplest and easiest, just drink 2 to 4 cups of red clover infusion 2 to 3 times a week. Remember, the nourishing herbal infusions are made by putting 1 ounce of dried herb into a quart jar, filling the jar to the top of the boiling water, using a wooden spoon to stir the herb into the water, putting a little more water in, putting a lid on it, letting it stand like that for at least 4 hours, overnight is fine, and then straining the liquid out, squeezing the herb to get all the liquid out of it, and then refrigerating the resulting liquid, which is what we're going to drink. Drinking 2 to 4 cups of red clover infusion 2 or 3 times a week is one of the most successful ways that I know to reduce BPH. Seed oils are supposedly inflammatory. Now, I had to add supposedly. There has been a lot of hoo-ha in the past month or two about seed oils were supposed to be inflammatory because they're rich in omega-6 fatty acids, but the research has vindicated that omega-6 fatty acids are not as inflammatory as we thought. So it's up to you. You know what? Olive oil is a really tasty oil, and it is a direct anti-inflammatory. So even if seed oils turn out to be little angels and not the devils we thought they were, replacing them in your diet with olive oil is still a good idea for your prostate. And seed oils are also called vegetable oils. They're made from things like soy oil, corn oil, canola oil, sesame oil, sunflower oil, cottonseed oil. It comes from a seed. It is that kind of oil. So, what else can we do? What did the prostate tell us? Move, move, move. Move, move, move. Join a dance class, get a dog, go for a walk, take up with somebody who likes to hike. Move, move, move. So that's the cream of the crop there. Pollen from the flowers of ryegrass is a traditional European remedy for both LUTS and BPH. Some pollens are incredibly powerful anti-inflammatory and anti-androgenic agents. This is one where it is usually taken as tablets, and that's because it's a pollen, and it's very difficult to get a pollen to agree enough with alcohol to go into a tincture state. A daily dose of 2 tablets of rye pollen extract found more than 3/4 of men experience complete relief or significant improvement in both their BPH and their LUTS. In a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, 69% of those who took half a teaspoon daily of bee pollen got relief from their symptoms. So you don't even really have to go out and get a special rye pollen. You can get bee pollen, which is fairly easily available. The men of Bulgaria, Turkey, and Ukraine use pumpkin seeds to prevent and treat BPH. Pumpkin seeds contain special essential fatty acids which can reduce swelling. Now, see, there's a seed, and so I would think, high in omega-6 fatty acids, maybe we should avoid this, and yet here are the men of Bulgaria, Turkey, and the Ukraine saying, use these pumpkin seeds because it reduces swelling, and it also contains cucurbitacins, which prevent testosterone from changing into DHT. Remember from last week, DHT, and that is dihydrotestosterone, is something that we don't want. We don't want testosterone to turn into dihydrotestosterone. High DHT levels are associated with lower urinary tract symptoms. Perhaps the diuretic effect of the pumpkin seeds helps as well. German herbalist Rudolf Fritz Weiss says only a specifically bred variety of pumpkin seeds that is found in Bulgaria, Turkey, and the Ukraine is really medicinal in use. However, I checked around with all of my friends and some men, and you know what I found? People use whatever pumpkin seeds they have, and it seems to work for them. I do not doubt that Weiss is right, that the special seeds that are grown in Bulgaria and Turkey and the Ukraine are especially effective, but our pumpkin seeds work too. The effective dose is never less than 2 heaping tablespoons full, morning and night, taken daily for the rest of your life. So I hope you like pumpkin seeds if you do this. Pumpkin seed increases the tone of the bladder muscles, relaxes the sphincter mechanism, decongests the prostate, and hastens recovery from the effects of swelling in the prostate. You may have heard of nettle root, which has been found to have a significantly anti-proliferative effect on damaged prostate cells. Some authors specified that the root must be of the annual nettle Urtica urens, but most of the people I talk to regard the roots of the usual perennial nettle Urtica dioica to be equal in effect. You can buy a standardized extract of nettle root, or you can dig your own, dry it, and make an infusion. If you live around nettle, it's really easy to get nettle root. The dose of the infusion is 1 to 2 cups a day. And so we got a few ways to deal with those prostates, and they're pretty easy too. It really just means eating a slightly better diet. And wasn't it wonderful that some of the things that we do for BPH also help to relieve LUTS, lower urinary tract symptoms, frequent urination at night, a weak and constant start and stop flow of urine, difficulty initiating urination with delays of up to a minute. Sounds like an airline, doesn't it? Intense urgency, often with little result. Straining to urinate, often with little result. Dribbling and leaking instead of urinating, or dribbling and leaking after you've urinated, and being unable to completely empty the bladder. I worked with a homeopath when I was putting together down their sexual and reproductive health. And she said that homeopathic remedies, in her estimation, are really effective for urinary tract symptoms, and especially for men with lower urinary tract symptoms. She suggests a variety of homeopathic remedies, and I'll go over them very briefly for you, but I do urge you to refer to down there, Sexual and Reproductive Health, The Wise Woman Way. Homeopathic clematis for dribbling urinary flow that starts and stops, and a little bit of sting at the last bit. Homeopathic ignatia for frequent urine urgency, but nothing happens. Homeopathic creosotum, yes, it is what you think, creosote, for involuntary hurried urination, as if somebody was pressing on your bladder. Homeopathic sepia, and that's the ink from the cuttlefish, for feeble, slow, and thick urine. Homeopathic Serenoa cerulata, and that is saw palmetto, for men who dribble instead of get a strong stream. And homeopathic sulfur for pain on urination and ineffectual tries at urination. Interesting where certain remedies tend to work very, very well. There has been some very interesting studies done on red clover. Remember, we were talking about drinking red clover infusion before. And they have found that red clover can actually reduce lower urinary tract symptoms. You know, Dr. Duke was talking before about sterols in plants, and red clover is an excellent source of plant sterols. And I suspect that if we were to look at what's going on there, that we would find some very interesting hormonal effects from the red clover that protect the prostate from cancer. Horsetail herb tea can soothe the urinary tract, improve sphincter function, and tone the bladder muscles. A cup a day is what is suggested. Pygeum is another herb that seems particularly helpful for men who are dealing both with LUTS and with BPH. In a placebo-controlled study, men taking pygeum or nettle root for 1 month reported significant increases in urine flow, substantial reduction in residual urine, and fewer trips to the bathroom at night. Are you in pain because of your lower urinary tract symptoms? Get into a tub of hot water right now. Take a dropperful each of saw palmetto and Hypericum perforatum right now, and continue to take that dropperful twice a day for the next month. And please limit your use of antihistamines, decongestants, diuretics, alcohol, coffee, tea, soda, and acidic foods. Let's free you from the pain, get the swelling down, and deal with these lower urinary tract symptoms. There are a lot of very invasive ways that modern medicine would like to work on you. They would like to widen your urinary channels surgically with a laser, TURP, or with needles, TUNA. I detail what these procedures are and down there, and believe me, unless you truly cannot deal with life without them, I would suggest that you do something else, like consider red clover infusion or perhaps comfrey infusion. Comfrey improves muscle tone in the bladder. It eases irritation in the bladder lining and the ureters. It heals all of the surfaces of the urinary tract. It counters inflammation in the urinary system and creates resilient health throughout the urinary system. That's why I call it a bladder star. There's allantoin in Comfrey, and it is a superb healer of mucous surfaces. Comfrey gives almost immediate relief to pain in the bladder. It also counters urge incontinence and overactive bladder. Comfrey's anti-inflammatory action relieves urethritis and prostate swelling. The astringent tannins tone and tighten the bladder and the pelvic floor muscles and counter stress incontinence. Comfrey also relaxes the detrusor muscle. And if you don't know what that is, oh, you really should. It's a very interesting thing. If you don't feel like drinking Comfrey, you can sit in it. A sitz bath of leaves or roots of Comfrey works really well for anybody who does not want to actually consume it. But I'll tell you, for best results, Comfrey leaf infusion, a cup or two a day. If you're really dealing with LUTS right now, I would say a cup or two a day until your symptoms abate, and then a quart or two of Comfrey per week. This is Susan Weed talking to you about your prostate or the prostate of some man that you love. We talked a lot about Saul Palmetto and got introduced to the prostate last week. And this week we've done alphabet soup. And next week we are going to get right down to the heart of the matter and talk about some really effective ways that we can help prevent prostate cancer, because there is a lot of stuff that goes on about that. I'm really looking forward to spending that time with you right here. Susan Weed, Green Blessings.
Thank you, Susan, for taking us on a journey through your connection to the earth and her green allies. For our listeners, you can learn more about Susan Weed and where to find the books that she's mentioned in these segments at susanweed.com. Make sure you tune in next week, where our discussion centers around prostate cancer and prevention. On behalf of Time Bank Radio, green blessings and be well.